Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Frequency. So while I was watching the episode, I kind of want to throw this out there. I meant to bring it up last episode. I had it in my notes and everything, but I totally forgot about it. I wanted to kind of bring up a comparison between this show and the show Awake. I don't know if anyone's, you might be listening to this. I don't know if you're actually familiar with that show. But essentially, it was like a short-lived show on NBC, if I remember correctly, where basically a guy had the power. Essentially, it wasn't really a power. Basically, a certain accident happened, and that basically his life got split up into two different realities. One reality where his wife lived and his son died, and then the other reality was vice versa. His son lived, but his wife died. And so basically, he kind of bounced back and forth between both realities. And essentially, he was a cop, and basically he could use one, something he learned in one reality to help him solve a case in another reality. And so the whole Remy remembering the shed existed before they changed time, but the moment they changed time, it got rid of it. That's what kind of sparked that in my head last time. And so I just want to kind of throw that out there as a note, it's just like that comparison, that kind of cop, procedural crime drama aspect to it, just kind of put that more so in perspective to me, and just kind of brought that up because I thought about the show more recently, but it's it just kind of, that comparison just kind of popped up in my head. And since we are talking about the whole interestingly enough, the whole process of we're still learning more and more about how things work in this world with the whole time and everything. When Remy ended up, after fighting with Thomas and whatnot, ended up getting hurt, when Thomas ended up dying in the past, obviously, meaning he disappeared from the present and whatnot, well, future/present. But the fact is that Remy's eye was still gashed. So it shows you that Remy doesn't flow with time, because normally the fact is that he doesn't exist. So that means Remy never should have been hurt, but she still maintained her wound. So meaning that time moves around Remy. She kind of isn't obviously her memory is affected by the time changes, particular memories about stuff that in her own personal life, her entire life is a little different. Yeah. I mean, who's really to say how different other aspects are, but it's, they don't get caught up in because this ain't a show about this vast, how time's different all around the world. It's just particular in her life. So that's the only differences in time we really know about. So, her memory is one thing, but it's physically her body doesn't move with time. So, so that was kind of interesting finding that out. So, for instance, if someone, for example, stabs her, but that person stops existing in time, she still gets the stab wound because she doesn't flow with time. She kind of exists outside of the shifts in time. So that was just kind of interesting to me. Just kind of a very interesting note. And in this episode, we see it a little bit more. The fact is of, you having Frank struggling with balancing everything. It's he kind of had to pull back the whole situation with Julie last episode, kind of going all crazy. Oh, no, listen, the person on this radio is Remy. Remy talked to her. And it's so your mom doesn't think I'm crazy, but your mom, Julie kind of still thinks he's a little crazy. It's he's yeah, you were right. I was just working too hard. She's even bringing up oh, did you ever talk to anybody? You might need to talk to someone, kind of saying oh, he's a little crazy. And it's from an outsider perspective, it's kind of yeah, he is a little crazy. I really, really wish Remy had spoken to her mom, but once again, you don't know the ramifications of doing what they're doing. And it's kind of, because it's complicating things. It's because it's he's, he has to choose between, saving Julie, being there for Remy, kind of coming back into her life, plus, balancing all of it, at once, balancing his job, trying to catch the Nightingale killer. It's just, this episode kind of shows it, a little bit of just trying to do one thing. He's so adamant. He wants to go after Nightingale because it means saving Julie. That's his main reason for doing this. I mean, it's obviously about stopping a bad guy, but also because he has a personal stake in it. But he can't really tell anybody that because Julie already thinks he's crazy, goes any further. He's still telling her to be careful, but she's just kind of brushing him off. It's okay, you're being a little crazy. It's to me, it's but why is it so crazy that you wouldn't believe him? It's I guess at this point, there's not been that many Nightingale victims, so it's no one really, they see the pattern a little bit, but she's kind of everyone's kind of got that mentality oh, it can never happen to me. It's to her, she's thinking he's just being overprotected, but it's you fit the criteria, you're a nurse, so it's kind of you should be on like more vigilant watch of like what could possibly happen. I mean, that's just my perspective on it, but it's like she doesn't take the situation as serious because she really does think Frank is kind of crazy. I mean, as we saw at the end of the episode, Nightingale's already got his eyes locked on her, and it's like, how does he choose his victims? It does make you wonder because he's parked outside of her house, so meaning he, for one, knows that she's a nurse, so must kind of. Well, no, I completely forgot. I'm such an idiot because like in the first episode, we saw him he was in the elevator, so obviously he knows that she's a nurse. So what he most likely does is pop up around hospitals, kind of getting more allocated with like, choosing his next victim was like all these different people. So he already knew she was a nurse, but it's like, how did he get her address? I mean, guess it could have followed him. And what I'm very curious about is like the profile behind it, like why he does what he does. Like, how does he have, like, is he just some random dude that passes around a hospital? The fact is, the rosary beads and stuff like that, it seems like maybe he's a priest or something. That's why he has such easy access in a hospital. But I mean, I guess it's like, all you have to do, it's not like that much of a hospital is kind of cut off from you. It's just, you can just wander around and be like, you're just looking for a certain room and stuff like that. No one will really, give you a second look in a hospital with there's so many people running around. It's just like, maybe you're here waiting for a family member. I feel like it, but maybe that's connected to Nightingale's past. Like the reason why they have, it's kind of like taking out on all these women nurses. Maybe Nightingale's mom was a nurse and she didn't treat him right. And so every time he's killing a nurse, he's like living out some twisted fantasy of killing his mom. Maybe it's a situation, I'm breaking this down because I've watched so many cop shows and crime dramas that I'm kind of like trying to understand the psychology behind it. But it's kind of like, maybe he's like, hey, I could never kill my own mom because I love her. And, even though she treated me like crap, I still love her and take care of her. So, but I'm living out that fantasy by killing other people kind of like her. Maybe the people who look like her, were a nurse and stuff like that. But the whole situation is very interesting. Like that moment where you had Remy, because Remy was so sure that Thomas was Nightingale that she was willing to cross a very dangerous line. That like, because Thomas was basically like, I have no idea. I don't remember, my victims' names and stuff like that. And he also, which kind of pissed Remy off a lot, and she looked like she was about to like shoot him, because at first it seemed like no, I'm not going to kill you, I'm just going to arrest you, do the right thing, bring you to justice. But it's like, nope, like, just after hearing that conversation, just she got tired. She's like, you know what, I'm going to do something worse to you. And the moment she gets her gun out, he already disappears because he died in the past, because he had already told Raimi in the present that it's like, I'd rather die than get arrested. And so when he got in that situation, he was kind of like, you know what, and so he ended up killing himself, or letting himself get hit by a car. But like I said, it was like, she's lucky that things played out the way they did, because if they didn't, I mean, to me, I thought things would play out differently, because it's like, okay, they capture him and they arrest him. And so because he's arrested, he's not on the run to be in a situation for Raimi to get access to him. So I was thinking like, hopefully things work out that way, but sadly they don't. I mean, obviously I knew he wasn't going to be Nightingale, because it's like, for one, he's in hiding. I mean, it's a possibility that like, hey, he's in hiding so he could end up killing more people, but it's just, I don't know. I wouldn't, especially after what happened with Maya kind of getting away from him and everything, and his mom's hiding him out. I feel like he wouldn't have an opportunity to get anybody else, get access to people like that, because it's like, for one, he's a wanted, like he's a fugitive, so people are on the look out for him. So it's kind of like, of course, he's not going to have the access he needs to kill like all those different people he's killed, because he's been hiding for like 20 years. But, for Raimi, she kind of chews Frank out, because she's like, you said it wasn't him. Why didn't you talk me out of it? And it's like, Frank's like, I tried to. It's like, you weren't going to listen. It's like, you've already got so much on your plate. You're dealing with your mom's service and everything. Plus, you just, for Raimi, it was just like, she wanted it to be him so badly, because it being him means like, once it's dealt with, she gets her mom back. So it's just like, she just wanted to rush to get things done, because she was just, all the signs kind of pointed to him, and so she was just so adamant about it, because she was like, I know it's him, it's got to be him, it's the only way I'm gonna get mom back. But sadly that turned out not to be the case, and so she's asking Frank from now on to like call her out on stuff like that. And it's just it's an interesting and sad situation. Like I said, Frank has to balance all this. Like, this is a lot to kind of have on the weight of your shoulders. It's like, so much rides on you catching a Nightingale killer, especially because it's like, with the timeline, it seems like he's only got a little while before Nightingale takes, Julie and everything. So I mean, and because it's also balancing future Julie with, past Julie, because it's like he's trying to be there for her, he's trying to be a dad. But as you can see, the episode also presented the fact is like he's missed out on a lot. I forgot what it was he was going to make her. He's going to add gummies into something. She's like, oh, I don't eat that anymore. He's like, what? Of course you do. You used to love this. This is kind of my favorite thing I used to make for you. And then he's like, it was back before. And then he kind of realized it's like, oh yeah, I wasn't around for like 2 years. I popped up every once in a while. Yeah, birthday, present drop off and stuff like that. But I wasn't there in your life. I don't know your likes and your dislikes. It's like, I don't really know you that well. I mean, she was kind of more like, no, it's okay. I'm sure it still tastes good and everything. And then there's also the fact is that, she's a big girl, so she understands when people are lying to her. Like, for instance, like the fact is that he was like, no. She brought up questions like, were you about to die? And he's trying to make her feel better at the same time. But like, no, it's not like that. Plus, he left her behind, to go solve the case. And bringing it back to it's like having that struggle between like wanting to be the father. He wants to be in his little girl's life, but also dealing with this whole Nightingale situation. It's not about, because he can't explain that to anyone. Just like, sadly, how Raimi can't explain her situation to everyone because everyone's looking around her like, why aren't you going to your mom's service? It's like everyone grieves in their own way, and it's kind of like crappy that she kind of gets the short end of the straw. Like, for instance, from her dad's partner, her captain / lieutenant, Satch. He was like, I'm disappointed. For the first time you letting me down. It's like, for one, it's like, shut the hell up, Mekhi Phifer. That's very dickish of you to say. It's like, don't judge someone else's like way of mourning. Especially because, like I said, she's in that complicated situation of knowing that she has the potential to save her mom. So she has to work doubly, triply hard just to kind of make sure that time changes. And that because she's hoping on it. She's holding on to that hope. Because going to her mom's the service, it cements it more. Like, because she's still holding on to the hope and, that, her mom's still alive. I mean, because remember, she lived with her mom for 20 years. It's hard to balance, like, this reality where she's not around with the one where it's like, yeah, I grew up with her. She was my single mom. She was my everything. I was her everything. So it's kind of hard on her. Like, she's like, you can't understand this. I wish you could understand it. And he's like, you're right. I don't understand it. And I mean, it's just, he's a little judgmental on that part. I mean, at least Gordo kind of understands. Like, he decides, I'm gonna do the service for you so you don't have to worry about it, because her family's like jumping down her throat. It's like aunts and stuff like that. People on Julie's side of the family are just like, oh, I want you to hold a service, but she doesn't want to. So Gordo decides to do it because it's like Julie's mom was very important to him too. So it's just a very complicated situation because going back to Frank's side of everything, it's like, she's like, you have to just like, Julie's like, you have to make Raimi come first before the job. It's, it's like, it makes you wonder like how life would be if he wasn't in contact with future Raimi. How would things play out? Would he be better off not knowing the things he knows? Because it complicates things more because of that relationship, because he's talking to future Raimi, who I still believe she does hold some resentment towards Frank, because it's like she doesn't necessarily, she's very stubborn in a sense. And I guess it comes from the fact is that she's not used to really listening to him, because it's like she had to grow up without him her whole life. She always thought he's kind of a bad father. Not necessarily a bad father, but just that he was never there. And that's kind of something that even though he's there, that's still suffering a little bit for past Raimi. And so maybe on some level, she's still holding on to that, because like Raimi in the past is feeling that. And, it's later down the road, maybe her, after these 20 years, she's still holding on to those feelings as she's talking to him. So, kind of that crossover, a little bit of, I know I'm not really explaining it well, but it's like, even with everything that's said and done, it's like maybe she's still harboring a little bit of those feelings, like subconsciously, of like, oh yeah, I have all these memories of the fact that you weren't there for me. It's not brought up, but the fact is all these changes that are happening to Raimi, like the fact is dad bailing on her and stuff like that, at the time it didn't make sense to her. But now that she's older, we haven't really gotten to look at it. But obviously what's happening with Raimi is like she, those memories are, there, but she's probably not accessing them. So, what was kind of like your dad off not doing what he was supposed to is kind of him helping you from the future, try and solve your mom's murder. like I said, she hasn't brought attention to it. Maybe it's there, but she's just kind of ignoring it because like she understands. But I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it is something she is ignoring. Like because it seems like really the different memories, like the ones she tends to focus on, it seems to be the memories from the original timeline when her dad died, rather than this timeline where he lived. Because the last time we saw her really access them was like in the first episode when she got the new memories. And remember, the fact is that she remembers both lives. So, because it led to an interesting, like the whole situation led to that interesting conversation between her and Frank being like, "Yo, I'm babysitting you tonight," and she's like, "It's not babysitting if it's your own kid." And he's like, "Whoa, oh, I didn't know you were an expert on this. I didn't know you wrote the book on parenthood." And she's like, "This is weird." It's like, yeah, it is. So it's kind of interesting. It seems like almost like he's getting a little further away from present day Remy, Remy as a little girl, and getting closer to Remy as an adult. So it's kind of a little weird. It's like it gives you a very interesting kind of different perspective. He's kind of learning about his daughter more so as an adult than he is about her from a kid. Like he's more tapped into her brain as an adult than he is a kid. It's the kind of point I'm trying to get across. But even though for Raimi things weren't a success this episode, because the fact of the matter is Nightingale is still out there, her mom is still dead in present day, it did kind of, because Frank himself brought it up. It's like, no, it's a victory because we took care of a monster. Like, it's not the way we wanted things to go. We wanted him to be Nightingale. We wanted to kind of arrest him and whatnot. Sadly, like I said, he didn't want to go to jail. But at the very least, we were able to stop Maya from being a victim. She kind of did it herself when she kind of took advantage and left when she did. Frank and Satch did play a part in that because it's like, because they showed up, Thomas got distracted and he ended up leaving the door unhatched, which gave her the opportunity to escape. But, it kind of sunk into Raimi. It's like, okay, we did a good job when she actually looked up Maya, saw her Facebook, she's married, has a kid and everything. And so it's like kind of seeing the silver linings to the situation that maybe they didn't catch Nightingale, but they stopped the bad guy. They helped save a woman's life. And because of that, she has a good life now. At least from a little bit we've seen, they're vacationing in Hawaii and whatnot. So there is a good side, like I said, silver lining to it. So. But overall a very good episode, and I'm very curious to see where things go down in the next episode. But that's really all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.